In November 1950, American Marines stumbled upon something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. An entire company of enemy soldiers frozen solid in combat positions. Their weapons aimed, their fingers on triggers, eyes still open. They looked like ice sculptures on a battlefield, but these weren't sculptures. These were men who chose to freeze to death rather than retreat. This is the story of the coldest battle in modern warfare, and the army that became frozen in time. In November 1950, American Marines stumbled upon something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. An entire company of enemy soldiers frozen solid in combat positions. Their weapons aimed, their fingers on triggers, eyes still open. They looked like ice sculptures on a battlefield, but these weren't sculptures. These were men who chose to freeze to death rather than retreat. This is the story of the coldest battle in modern warfare, and the army that became frozen in time. The Korean War is 5 months old. American-led UN forces are pushing north toward the Chinese border, confident that victory is just weeks away. General MacArthur has promised everyone will be home by Christmas. But in the mountains of North Korea, surrounding a man-made lake called the Chosin Reservoir, something terrifying is about to happen. The temperature? It's plummeting to 36 degrees below zero. That's minus 38 degrees Celsius. Cold enough that weapons jam. Morphine freezes solid. Blood plasma turns to ice. And that's before the enemy arrives. Hidden in those frozen mountains are 120,000 Chinese soldiers. They've crossed the border in complete secrecy. No fires, no lights, marching only at night. And they're about to spring the deadliest trap of the entire war. Their target? 30,000 American, British, and South Korean troops. Completely surrounded. November 27th, 2:30 a.m. In the middle of a howling blizzard, bugles suddenly echo through the mountains. Then comes the sound that will haunt these Marines forever. Human wave attacks. Thousands upon thousands of Chinese soldiers swarming the UN positions. But here's what the Americans didn't know. These Chinese troops were equipped for a different war. While US Marines had sleeping bags rated for Arctic conditions, parkas, and insulated boots, many Chinese soldiers wore quilted cotton jackets, canvas shoes. Some had nothing but straw wrapped around their feet. Why? Because China's army had just come from fighting a civil war in the south. They had summer uniforms, and their logistics couldn't keep up with this massive secret invasion. The Chinese commanders knew this, and they sent them anyway. The fighting was unlike anything in modern warfare. So cold that rifles stopped working. Men had to urinate on their weapons to unfreeze them. Grenades wouldn't explode. The wounded would freeze to death in minutes if they couldn't move. And in the chaos of battle, something even stranger was happening in the mountains above. On December 6th, as Marines fought their way through the mountain pass, they came across a position overlooking the road. At first, they thought it was an ambush. An entire company of Chinese soldiers, about 100 men, perfectly positioned with weapons aimed at where the Marines would pass. But no one fired. As they got closer, the Marines realized why. Every single soldier was frozen solid. Still in fighting positions, kneeling behind cover, weapons aimed. Some had their hands on grenades, others were holding their rifles, ready to fire. Their faces showed no fear, just determination. They had frozen to death while waiting to attack. One Marine officer later wrote, "They were like statues. I touched one on the shoulder, and he didn't move. It was like tapping marble." These men, later called the Ice Sculpture Company by Chinese historians, had been ordered to hold this position and ambush the Americans at all costs. As temperatures dropped past -40, they had a choice: abandon their position and live, or hold their ground and complete their mission. They chose their mission, and they froze to death doing it.
But this wasn't the only company. According to Chinese military records, they lost over 10,000 soldiers to the cold, more than they lost to American guns. Entire battalions were found frozen in the mountains. Some were still clutching weapons. Others were huddled together for warmth. That never came. When American Marines found these frozen soldiers, something unexpected happened. These were enemy combatants who had been trying to kill them just hours before. But the Marines were so moved by their discipline and sacrifice that they stopped. Some saluted. Others left rations and cigarettes beside the frozen bodies as a sign of respect. One Marine wrote home, "I will never forget those frozen Chinese soldiers." Whatever we think about the war, those men died doing what they thought was their duty. That takes guts. The battle raged for 17 days. The Marines, outnumbered 4-1, fought their way 78 miles through 6 Chinese divisions to reach the port of Hungnam and evacuate by sea. It wasn't a retreat. It was what military historians call attacking in a different direction. The cost was devastating. 836 Americans killed in action. Over 12,000 casualties total from combat and frostbite. The Chinese lost over 30,000 men, 2/3 from the cold itself. The survivors became known as the Chosin Few. Every single Marine who fought there received the Presidential Unit Citation, one of the highest honors in the U.S. military. But the story of the frozen Chinese soldiers haunted veterans from both sides for decades. In China, they're remembered as martyrs, the ice sculpture company, who held their posts until death. In America, they're remembered as evidence of the terrible price of war. Today, memorials stand in both the United States and China, honoring those who fought at Chosin. The American Marines who survived call themselves the Chosin Few and hold reunions every year, though fewer gather each time. In China, the frozen soldiers of Chosin have become legendary symbols of sacrifice. The battle was depicted in one of China's highest-grossing films, The Battle at Lake Changjin, introducing a new generation to their story. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir lasted just 17 days, but it demonstrated something that would define the entire Korean War. Neither side would give up, no matter the cost. The Chinese were willing to send men into battle, knowing they might freeze to death. The Americans were determined to fight their way out against impossible odds. One Marine who fought there put it simply, "We were all just trying to survive." Some of us did. Some of us didn't. And some of us froze standing up, still fighting. The Korean War would drag on for another 2.5 years, but after Chosin, everyone knew. This war would be won through endurance, not speed, and the cost would be measured in frozen bodies on both sides. That's the end of this video. Would you like to see more of it? I hope so. Let me know in the comments.